Here's a topic that I wanted to do a little bit more research on after reading Paycheck to Purpose, and it's a topic of work burnout. And from the Harvard Business Review, it describes burnout as you're perpetually exhausted, annoyed, and feeling unaccomplished and unappreciated. I want to jump in, talk about Ken Coleman's 5 causes of burnout, and kind of what I think we can do to help combat those. So let's jump into it. All right, so Ken Coleman kind of talks about 5 causes of burnout in Paycheck to Purpose. And where this kind of comes from is he looks at people's jobs and work and see how they've just kind of lost interest. And you know the feeling of when you get up and you have to drag yourself out of bed to get to work. When you're at work, you're not feeling like you're really valued. You're not feeling like you're important. You're not feeling that the work you do is really meaningful. So Ken Coleman describes 5 main causes of burnout. And a couple of articles that I was reading online from the Harvard Business Review, from the University of California, Berkeley, greatergood.berkeley.edu, they kind of mentioned 6. I really like Ken Coleman's 5 just because I feel like it ties a lot of them together and it just feels a little bit more personalized. We're going to go through each of the 5 causes of burnout and what I think we can do to help kind of combat those. So the first one is losing passion for the work. And I see this as coming in kind of 2 different parts. You either had that fire to begin with, and then as the years kind of went by, you've just kind of slowly lost that passion. You've slowly lost that draw that kind of kept you going to work, kept you working hard. Or you never really had that fire in the first place. The paycheck is really starting to wear off, and that kind of new job smell is fading away into the background. And so I think the latter is probably true for the majority of Americans and for the majority of people in the workforce. And I think it happens a lot more frequently. We get a job offer, we find a new opportunity that's going to pay us a lot more. And well, with more money, we feel like we're able to do more things. We're able to better provide for our family. We're able to buy nicer stuff. We're able to have a better apartment, a better car. But after several months of that, it kind of wears off. And it really kind of sets in of what work actually looks like. As we kind of get more comfortable and that new jobness kind of fades away, we're left with what our job actually is, and it's just work. It's a paycheck. And we start wanting to do more. We experience that pull towards a greater purpose, and it causes us to start resenting our work, and sometimes even our coworkers. Our work becomes this dull, hollow shell compared to what it once was. So I think one of the ways that we have to kind of combat losing our passion is figuring out what our passion actually is. You either had that fire to begin with and it's faded along the way, or you never had that fire in the first place and the paycheck is starting to kind of wear off. And I also want to say that as I'm kind of talking about different ideas that I've had on how we can combat this, obviously one of the answers is going to be, hey, quit and find a new job. While I think that can be true for some cases, I don't always think it should be the first solution. I think there are ways that we can kind of control our workplace and kind of control what we're experiencing there, and things that we can actively do to help change or to help combat that burnout and even stay with our job. It may even lead to more money. It may even lead to more responsibility, more passion, more meaning in the work. And quitting the job and going to a new one can obviously mean a fresh start, but I think we should also try to change the workplace that we're in, and then if that ends up not working, then we can move on to another place. Kind of going back to finding that passion, we have to take the time to really self-assess. I mean, this is something that I talk about in the book review. You have to take time to actually look into your life, look into what you actually want, and find ways to actually make that happen. Start making a plan, start figuring out where you want to get to, and then start mapping out a path. And maybe it's just working in a different department in your work. Maybe it's finding something that's more meaningful. Maybe there's certain aspects of your work that you really like, and it would just take sitting down with your supervisor and say, hey, I really like this part. I don't really like this part. Is there a way that we can do more of this and less of this? And so if you're feeling that your work doesn't really matter and you've lost that passion, we've got to figure out what that passion is. See if our current job can fulfill that passion and have that discussion. And a lot of these with burnout, it comes with communicating our feelings. It comes with communicating what we're actually thinking and what we think we can do to help solve it. Because when you go to a supervisor or you go to a coworker or really anyone and you have somewhat of a solution already made, people are so much more likely to help you or to give you what you want because they see that you've put time into it. You've actually put thought and energy into that background, into that solution. And so finding ways that you can communicate and having ideas on how we can maybe solve it, I think that can really open the door to so many new opportunities and really get that passion back. So the next cause that Ken Coleman kind of talks about is my workplace is toxic. And I think a toxic workplace is kind of an overused term in our day and age. I think we're very quick to say, well, it's just toxic when it might just be one experience. For me, when I think of a toxic workplace, I think of people are mean-spirited, people don't want to work together. It's an ongoing problem. With burnout, I think it's always going to be an ongoing issue. It's not a one-time thing and then good for a couple of weeks and then it kind of comes up again. It's a constant day-to-day thing. There's something that's just constantly dragging you down, that's poisoning you. And so if the people that you're working with are actually mean-spirited and constantly putting each other down and competing and finding ways to make your job more difficult, what we really need to do is focus on what we can do, what we can control in our workplace. Because when we're working with others, we can't force them to do things that we want them to do. We can't force anyone to do what we want them to do. It really comes from what can we control? How can we make this place better? How can we change the culture? How can we get to know our coworkers better? Because a lot of the times, people might just not understand the impact that they're having. People might not understand, hey, this causes a real problem with me. How can we look at it a different way? Because people kind of get set in, this is how it's done, this is how it should always be done. But when you come to them and say, hey, I don't really like that, and express what you're feeling and express how you see the situation, and hopefully you can have an open communication, have an honest communication on how we can actually fix and address that. So a lot of the times I think a toxic workplace comes from really a lack of communication. I mean, people might not see what effect they're having, might not see, hey, when I do this, this is the result, because everyone kind of sticks with what they know, sticks with what their department is, and seeing the whole picture can help us kind of alleviate that poison, alleviate that toxicity. The third cause of burnout that Ken Coleman talks about is I'm bored to death. And I think we've all kind of been there at one point or another in our careers and in our jobs where you go to work, you have a busy morning, and then after, shortly after 12 o'clock, it comes to about 1 or 2, and you kind of go, all right, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm bored. And especially in some of the entry-level jobs like fast food, working in a warehouse that I remember, after a while it was like, yeah, just go sweep the floor. And it was kind of like there's these meaningless tasks that don't actually do anything, but it's meant to just fill your time. And doing those days on end just makes it so boring. I mean, you're just watching the clock and it crawls by. And you're just waiting for that 5 o'clock bell to ring. And really what this comes down to is it's kind of our mindset, and as well as kind of talking with our supervisor. I also want to make sure that you're establishing boundaries, because I remember doing this and going, hey, there have been times in the past few weeks where I get to this certain point of the day and I'm like, I don't really have too much else to do. So I try to find other things, but I don't really feel like they're really impactful. So I just get bored. And my supervisor went, oh, okay, let's see what we can do to fix that. And just got overwhelmed. And so it can kind of flip-flop, and that's the next cause of burnout, is feeling overwhelmed. But just making sure you're understanding and going, hey, this is kind of what I'm experiencing after about 2 o'clock. Is there another thing that I can kind of take on that can help me? And I think a big part of that, if you're feeling bored or things like that, coming to your boss or your supervisor with actually something that you want to learn, or maybe like an online course. It's like, hey, I kind of run out of things to do right around here, and what I'd love to do is learn more about this opportunity. I'd love to learn more about marketing. I'd love to learn more about Google Ads, Google Analytics, social media marketing, kind of things like that, and go, hey, would this be something that might help? Could I start looking into it and maybe spend an hour, 45 minutes a day just trying to research it? And I think that really shows your supervisor that, hey, I know I'm kind of out of things to do, but I really want to learn something that can help further. I want to try to learn something else. Is that something that I can do that'll ultimately help the business? And always coming to them with an idea of a solution. It kind of comes down to when people come with a problem to a supervisor or manager or whoever it might be, they have a monkey on their back, and the monkey's the problem. And when they come in and they say, hey, this is the problem, this is the monkey, as a manager, you want to make sure that people actually leave with their monkeys. Otherwise, you end up with a zoo. You start running a zoo, because everyone just comes in, leaves their monkey, and you have now 3 monkeys or 5 monkeys or 10 monkeys now running around your office. And so you want to help people see that, hey, when you come in here, I'm happy to talk with you about a problem, but you got to take your monkey with you. And coming in and going, I have this monkey and I have an idea of a solution. What do you think? And most of the times manager will be like, yeah, I think that might work. Or, well, let's see if we can't do this. And it's kind of actually editing the solution and finding a way that you can actually change something and edit something rather than start it from scratch is always easier. It's always easier to make edits and alterations rather than come up with something from scratch. So whether you're writing, whether you're trying to solve a problem, jot down pretty much any idea and then alter it. Even if it's a completely new idea by the end, it's so much easier to change things rather than come up with something from scratch. And so finding ways that you can actually solve some of these problems, find ways that you can kind of combat that boredom and make it meaningful to you, make it something you actually want to do, not just, hey, I'm bored, I need more tasks, because then you'll just get more tasks that you don't really care about and it'll just perpetuate that boredom. The fourth cause that Ken Coleman talks about is I'm completely overwhelmed. And so you go from being bored to the complete opposite. I feel buried. I feel like I can never get enough done. I feel like whenever I finish something, something else comes up immediately. My priorities are constantly changing. I start working on a project, and as soon as I'm almost done, a new thing comes up that's now the top priority, and so I have to leave that one and go back, and it just feels like I'm running around. I don't know what to do. And as soon as you start focusing on one task, another one just falls through the cracks. There's a lot I have to say on this one because this is probably the one that I feel the most when I experience burnout, because I'm someone who likes to get things done. I'm someone who likes to be busy. I hate being bored. It drags out the day and drags out hours so much. And so I'd rather be busy, but I don't want to feel so overwhelmed that I'm like, okay, I have 15 things on my list and I have 7 of them that I need to get done now, but now another one just came up and now that one's apparently the highest priority. But then the next day someone comes and tells me and goes, hey, where's this? Oh, well, I had to go do this other thing. Anyway, so this is the one that I probably connect with the most because it's just kind of who I am as wanting to be a people pleaser. I usually always say yes, that I can work on it and get something done, and it becomes a challenge. So when you're feeling this kind of overwhelming feeling, again, it just feels like a battle that you have to fight on every front. And as soon as you make some ground on one side, the other side is caved in. As you feel overwhelmed, it starts to bleed into other areas of your life. You come home and you're exhausted. You don't have time or energy to do the things that you actually care about, actually enjoy. You start just laying down and hoping that you can get the rest of it done, or you overwork yourself. You stay way later and it cuts into time with your family and whatnot. And so to really combat this overwhelming feeling of just so busy, again, I think it goes back to communication. It really goes back to sitting down and saying, hey, look, I have all of these things on my plate. And sitting down with whoever your supervisor or manager is and saying, look, I have all of these things on my plate. What is the highest priority? And kind of talking with them about establishing priorities and almost a little bit of boundaries too. After you set the priorities, you sit down and you go, okay, great. This is what I'm going to be working on. And just making sure that everything isn't the highest priority. Because a lot of the times when a manager comes to me and says, hey, I need this done, to me that's like saying, this is now the top of the list, get it done now. And having to have that conversation going, look, I need to know what's the highest priority, and it can't be whenever something new just pops up. Establishing boundaries that can also implement. Something that I really remember is I would come in to the office. I used to work part-time, and when I would come into the office the next day, like I would leave at I think it was 2:30, 3, and I would come in the next day and I'd have 4 different papers on top of my keyboard, and I'd have 3 boxes sitting by my desk. There was one day I couldn't even get to my desk. It was so buried. And so I finally had to talk with everyone and go, look, I can't do this. I cannot come in. My desk is a complete mess. I have 5 different things that are apparently highest priority. It's look, I need some kind of a system that can address this problem because I'm not going to keep doing this. And so what I ended up doing is getting a shelf that hangs up by my desk and that people kind of can put things in. And if it is the highest priority, it needs to be either an email or it needs to be verbal communication. You can't just put a piece of paper with a sticky note on my desk that says needs to get done. I will ignore it. And that's what I told him, because I was like, this is not working for me because everything apparently is highest priority. And so taking the time to actually establish those boundaries and implement what tasks need to be done, what's the highest priority, and also taking time to just kind of appreciate what you have done, what you have achieved. Because a lot of the times when we're just so overwhelmed and trying to balance the workload, you just start running from one task to another. And instead of taking the time to go, okay, we won this side, we won this fight. Let's take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, take a quick break, walk around, go chat with a coworker, just give yourself a little bit of time to breathe, and then go back into another side. You don't have to be so go all the time. So really taking the time to explain what you have on your plate, what you want to work on, and what the priorities are can really help. And it's calculated efforts and celebrating necessary wins. I think those are the ones that really help with fighting this overwhelming workload. The last cause of burnout that Ken Coleman talks about is I feel underappreciated. And usually you see this burnout being tied to some of the other ones. And a lot of the times a mixture of these burnouts can happen, which kind of causes us to be resentful, to complain about our jobs, to hate our work, to, wake up on that morning and go, I have to get up, I have to get ready, and then I have to go to work, and then I just have the weekend. And once the weekend's over, I have to go back to work. Feeling underappreciated, I think, is always tied to being overwhelmed in a little bit, because you feel like, hey, I'm running from one task to another, but we're not seeing that celebration. And it doesn't have to be, big marching band and fanfare every time we complete a task, but just at least knowing that someone sees what you're doing and appreciates it and goes, hey, that was huge, thanks so much, or you did a great job, let's keep it up. And because a lot of the times we just see the bad stuff, we remember the bad stuff more, because I think it almost happens a little bit more frequently, because we're constantly being asked, hey, where's this? Hey, what's going on with this? Hey, how close are we on this? As opposed to, hey, that was awesome. And it's usually a one-time thing. Whereas if it's a couple week project, it's kind of like a constant being asked of, hey, what's going on with this? How are we on this? And just kind of that follow-up. So it's a shift from focusing on what we haven't done to focusing on what we have done and what we are doing, as opposed to what we haven't done. Because a lot of the times, that's how I've felt, is it's a focus on what I haven't done, as opposed to, well, I have done these things. Oh, great. Well, those really helped, but I really need this. And so I think it can be really difficult for a supervisor to see when people are feeling underappreciated, because they just don't know. And it kind of comes from people being open and honest about what's important to them. About, hey, look, this is something that I feel. I don't feel like I'm being valued. And that may come from, hey, I don't think I'm getting paid enough. Or it may come from, I just don't feel like anyone cares what I do. And people care about what I haven't done. And so finding ways to give people the opportunity to hear your voice, hear your side, hear what you're thinking, can really help change the workplace. It just allows your supervisor to go, okay, this person cares about this, so I need to put more attention on that. Because I think sometimes we kind of fall into the trap of thinking that everyone should just know how we're feeling, and that's not the case. Because we have a responsibility to actually share how we're feeling, and if our voice isn't heard after we give people a chance, then yes, I would say it's time to start looking at other opportunities. Just making sure that you can actually be heard can actually really help with some of these burnout causes. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it helped you kind of combat burnout a little bit, at least maybe giving you some new ideas. Let me know what you guys have done to help combat burnout, what you've done to fix burnout, because it's something that I think we all experience periodically throughout our lives, and knowing how we can help each other to actually get through these kind of rough patches can be a real benefit. So if you like, make sure to leave a 5-star review, leave me your feedback, send me an email, colten@mycareerpathpodcast.com, or check out my website, mycareerpathpodcast.com. We got a lot of cool stuff. We got some blog posts that are coming out, social media and whatnot. So hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day.